Hello and welcome to Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. Now, this is where we take a look inside the world of media, analysing the trends, the issues and the reporting of some of this week's top stories. I'm Peter Ndoro. This is what's coming up on the show. We focus quite a bit on the report of the Commission of Inquiry into interference in the decision-making in the newsroom of the South African Broadcasting Corporation, and that was released this past week. We'll talk to the Commission Chair, Joe Thloloe, who tells us what he found. Now, if you have any thoughts on this story, after all, the SABC does belong to you, then please leave us a message on Twitter using the hashtag SABC Media Monitor. Hashtag SABC Media Monitor. We really want to know what you think about the state of affairs at the SABC. Also on the show, an in-house radio digital station makes its way into Brandvlei Correctional Centre. Yes, that's right, in what's believed to be a first on the continent, a prison radio station operated by inmates with their own voices on air. We also continue with our new feature where we take you back in time, and so find out what year and which story we take you back to a little later in the show. But first, let's take a look at what's on the front pages of your Sunday newspapers this morning. We begin with the Sunday Times, and this leads with a story about the SABC's blackout of Premier soccer coverage spreading from TV to radio, leaving millions of soccer-loving South Africans with no access to the country's #1 sport. And this is in the midst of a battle with the PSL over the broadcast rights, and the SABC being unable to meet the high costs of those rights. The City Press is reporting tighter border controls as on the way to try and manage the crisis of undocumented immigrants in the country. This will include moving refugee centres to the country's borders and strengthening legislation to stem what's believed to be the easy flow and settlement of undocumented migrants. The Sunday Independent front page exposes what they believe is a group of politicians, campaign managers and strategists earning millions for their roles in President Cyril Ramaphosa's ANC leadership campaign, CR17. Now, the paper has pictures of some of the campaign managers as well as some of the main funders. The Sunday Tribune has a similar story saying how the R1 billion CR17 campaign funds were spent on various people's roles in securing President Ramaphosa's victory at the ANC's elective conference at Nasrec. Now, the paper says that it had access to bank statements and emails to support their story. The Weekend Argus on Sunday also leading with President Ramaphosa's CR17 campaign, talking about how people like PIC board member Maria Ramos and ENC owner Johnny Copeland are among those that post-Nasrec donors who put in 14 million rand just last year. Okay, so that's your newspapers, and we'll take a look at those with our guest editors a little bit later in the program. But now let's take a look what's been trending on social media this morning, and this is updating all the time. So this was a short while ago, and the sacred space is always in the top 5 on Sunday morning, because this is at this time Tamin Gubeni on Metro FM has got this a sacred space program, and people really get into it on social media. Sunday Thoughts is always about these motivational ideas and thoughts that people share with each other on a Sunday. Eid Mubarak Al-Adha is trending because Muslims around the world are celebrating Al-Adha and Eid Mubarak, and this one at number 4, Stormy, Kylie Jenner's daughter, and it's just going mad. Let's take a look at this clip and you'll see why it's trending.
Birthday, happy birthday to you, happy birthday dear Mommy, happy birthday.
All right, so the key is if you've got a baby, just get them to sing on a camera and it'll trend probably. So those are our top trends. Again, something we might look at a little bit later on. Okay, so let's get into the program. There's so much to get through on the show this morning, and helping us to make sense of these stories are our guest editors today. And I want to say good morning to Tandy Smith, Head of Policy Program at Media Monitoring Africa, Portia Kobue, who's the news editor at Kaya FM. Good morning, ladies. Give us a wave.
Hi, good morning.
There we go. We'll be chatting to them in a short while. Okay, so let's get into the program. It's no secret that for some time, the public broadcaster, the SABC, lost some of its trust with the public, with decisions such as banning the broadcast of violent protests. Accusations were made of editorial interference in the SABC newsroom. But was there a political agenda, and did SABC staff get subjected to abusive authority? Well, veteran journalist Joe Thloloe, together with law firm director Stephen Tawana, were tasked by the SABC to find out. And they released their long-awaited report into interference in the SABC News on Monday.
58 submissions, a year-long inquiry into the state of the SABC's newsroom between 2012 and 2017. Hlaudi Motsweneng, Chief Operations Officer for most of the time.
SABC suffered from the capricious use of authority and power to terrorize staff and to deflect the corporation from its mandate and its editorial policies.
The inquiry recommends that some of the decisions taken on Motsweneng's instructions be reviewed. Responding to the report, Motsweneng says that the impartiality of the report is questionable and that he does not regret empowering women at the SABC.
Nothing wrong about the appointment of Nothando Maseko. In any case, I don't apologize to put women on top at the SABC, because that is what I was looking to do.
The commission cautioned against a witch hunt for the so-called enforcers, saying that it would divide an already fractured institution. The SABC, however, says it will act against transgressions.
The SABC commits to taking urgent disciplinary action against those implicated in terms of the SABC disciplinary code and policies. The notion that holding those implicated in wrongdoing accountable would be seen as witch hunt is rejected. In fact, it is part of the terms of reference of the inquiry to recommend appropriate corrective action, which may include disciplinary action where there is misconduct. It is the SABC view that due process must be followed when there is evidence of transgression of SABC's policies and procedures and related misconduct. The SABC wants to put on record that it will not tolerate any interference with editorial independence of the newsroom.
So that was the release of the report by the Commission of Inquiry into Interference in the Decision-Making in the Newsroom of the SABC, and that was for the period between 2012 and 2017. Let's now speak to one of the authors of this report, retired Executive Director of the Press Council of South Africa and the Commission Inquiry's Chair, Dr. Joe Thloloe. He joins us now on the line. Thanks very much indeed for joining us on the program, Ntate Thloloe. Perhaps I can just begin by saying, when they approached you to do this commission, what did the SABC ask you to do?
We were asked to investigate whether there was political or other interference in the editorial decision-making as a SABC.
All right, so was that all that you were asked? Because I know that there were concerns about business interference as well.
As I say, all interference we had to look into.
All right, so how did you go about doing this?
We invited written submissions from all staff and all members of the public. We got the written submissions and we then asked people to come and give oral evidence on what they had submitted. And our findings are based on what was given to us by staff and other members of the public. We had about 58 hearings, which involved members of staff, which involved trade unions, which involved political parties, and just ordinary individuals who came and gave their evidence.
All right, so 58 doesn't sound like a huge number. Do you think that you managed to get to hear all the voices that were required to form an opinion?
Yes, we believe what we heard gave us the texture of what life was between 2012 and 2017 for SABC staff members.
All right. You use an interesting word there when you say texture. What does that mean? Are you saying that it gives us a glimpse and perhaps not a detailed analysis?
We didn't give a legalistic report. What we said was, this is what it used to be like to work for the SABC in that period. So you get the raw emotions, the pain, the anger that was at the SABC. That's what you find in the report.
All right. So what did you find in the main?
Our main finding was that there was a very capricious use of power by senior staff members, by senior officials within the SABC. And they terrorized staff, and they put fear into people and deflected the corporation from its mandate and from its editorial policies.
So, did you get a number of the people that were cited as perhaps contributing to this fear, like Faith Mutambi? They say that you didn't give them an opportunity to tell their side of the story. What do you say to that?
As I say, I'm not very keen to engage in a tit-for-tat argument with people who were invited to come to the commission and didn't come to the commission. What we have done is we have put down our findings and we have handed this over to the board of the SABC. And it is the board that is going to decide what to do with those findings.
Beyond the interviews that you did you have access to other sources, for example, the Special Investigating Unit, the Ad Hoc Committee in Parliament that also looked at the SABC Public Protector's report? Were all of those considered in your conclusions that you drew eventually?
Not the Special Unit report, not the Ad Hoc Committee. We spoke to people who were at the SABC and who would either confirm or deny what was in the other reports.
All right, so one of the things that you said is that a witch hunt for enforcers will not heal the corporation. It will divide an already fractured institution. The SABC is saying that that's not a position that they're going to take, and that enforcers, if there's a story to answer to, need to be dealt with. Why did you think that it's not a good idea to go after those that are being labelled as enforcers?
One, it is the board's prerogative to decide what to do. But at the launch of this report, the board chairperson said that they had been doing their own investigations. And it is as a result of those investigations that they found that some appointments were very suspect. And I think he said plus minus 30 people have been identified, and they are going to apply to court to have those positions reversed. Now, this is separate. He said they were going to look at our report and see if there are other names in our report that they could add to the 30 that they have already identified. That process is a board process. Now, the reason we said that a search for enforcers would be fruitless is because it is difficult to draw a line and say this one was an enforcer, that one wasn't an enforcer. The culpability starts at the top, obviously. The three people who were at the top of the newsroom at the time, they can be found to have been interfering in the editorial independence of the publication. But the people who followed their instructions, that's when it becomes very dicey. They claim they followed the instructions after being threatened with dismissal. And the chain, it goes down the chain right up to the lowest member of staff. They had to obey instructions or otherwise they would lose their jobs. So they were all being threatened. Now, at what point do you say this one should have fought back and that one shouldn't have fought back? The reporter who was instructed to go and cover a Faith Mutambi function, is that person guilty because that person obeyed the instructions that they were given? The most painful part of it is that, like in any situation of oppression, the oppressed turn against each other in an attempt to defend themselves from the oppressor. Now, what you had at the SABC at the time was that people were pointing fingers at each other and calling each other enforcers. And that cascades down the structure. So it's a very naked territory.
All right. Okay, I think we understand what you're saying there. All right, let's talk about those at the top then. The Motsoenengs, Muntambis of this world. If they did enforce their authority and abuse it, were you able to ascertain to what end?
That was the difficult part. There was nobody who said, I got instructions from the ANC head office. Not one of the witnesses said that. So it was not possible to trace a line from the ANC office in the Tuli House to the SABC newsroom. But all along the whole SABC had ANC colors all over it. Taking, for example, the minister is an ANC member, is a minister because he is in an ANC government. So whatever he did, capricious or not, can't be divorced from what the ANC stood for. So the ANC colors lie at the SABC. Although we don't have evidence, direct evidence that says the Tuli House instructed us to do A, B, or C.
All right. Okay, and perhaps finally, if you could just take us through some of your main recommendations of what the SABC can do to chart a new course forward.
We have suggested some changes to the culture at the SABC. We have suggested new structures that should be able to protect the newsroom from outside interference. Starting with the structures, we have recommended that we should have the head, the executive of news being the editor-in-chief, being the person who actually is the highest pinnacle to which people can refer issues. It shouldn't be anybody from the commercial side of the SABC who is in charge of editorial. We have recommended that there should be an editorial ethics advisory committee consisting of a retired judge, of a retired editor, of somebody who is teaching or was teaching ethics, journalism ethics at a tertiary institution. Now, this committee would advise staff as well as all the managers about ethical issues in the corporation basis. This committee wouldn't make the final decisions. The decision making rests entirely with the editorial, with the line management.
All right. So theirs would be advisory. Ntate Joe Thloloe, unfortunately, time's not on our side, but we thank you so much indeed for giving us some insights and what really could not only have been a very difficult job to do, but thank you so much indeed for joining us on the line this morning. That was Joe Thloloe, who's the chairperson of this Commission of Inquiry into editorial interference in the public broadcaster. And this report, of course, is available. Go onto the SABC website and just Google search and you'll be able to read it. It's about 60 pages long and it's well worth a read, I think, just for you to get some background, and it doesn't take all that long to get through. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and after that we'll chat with our guest editors about this report, and one of them used to work here.
Want to join the box in Japan? Sign up or upgrade today at an MTN store for a chance to win. Get a massive 23 gigs of data plus 1,000 all-net minutes, yes, 1,000 all-net minutes, all for only $579 per month on a 24-month SIM-only MTN made-for-business L plan. Connect with this exclusive business deal and you'll score a bonus smartphone, a tablet, or a speaker at no extra cost. We got you, Boca. MTN.
On Full View, the end of the day means unpacking the day's events. We recap all major news stories from around the world.
The African Union's decision to suspend Sudan's membership was made by the AU Peace and Security Council.
It was a unanimous decision. We said we'll give them up to 60 days.
And have in-depth discussions on what's happening in our country.
This economy, for it to grow, you need people that will be working in order for them to be able to have the buying power.
We stay on the visuals, they're busy shooting.
We drove around this.
Right, welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor. Now, before the break, we were talking to veteran journalist Joe Thloloe about the report he authored on the interference in the SABC newsroom. Well, we carry on with this issue now with our guest editors, Tandy Smith, Head of Policy Programme at Media Monitoring Africa, and Portia Kobua, who's the news editor at Kaya FM and a former SABC employee. Come back. Ladies, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Let me start with you, Thandi, actually. Your impressions. I mean, as Media Monitoring Africa, the SABC has been on your radar for a long, long time. And so you've seen the processes and the drama play out. This report, when you looked at it, your first impressions?
Well, I think the first reaction was that it sort of affirmed a lot of what we had known and had come out in our own research over the last couple of years. We did a lot of analysis into when the protest ban, the editorial decisions around the protest ban, we looked into that analysis, and we also took part in the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee inquiry. And it was around the time that we did our analysis into the local government elections, the coverage of that, where we found for the first time systemic bias in the coverage, in SABC's coverage of the elections, which was in favour of the ANC. So immediately this report just sort of is an additional evidence into what we already know happened during this period.
What you had already
Absolutely
observed.
confirms it, yes.
Okay. Portia, your initial thoughts, and what was interesting for me is that you actually testified at the commission itself.
Yeah, I did make input.
Yeah, so first thing I want to get is, what was your impression of the commission itself and its work, and then the report?
I think the work of the commission was very crucial. I think that the public needed to know, in more detail about what was really transpiring in the SABC newsroom. I mean, I think that before then there were a lot of rumors and mixed with politics, so people were not really clear about what the issues really were. So I think the report serves to actually say, yes, it is true, there was interference in the news. Yeah.
So as a former employee, do you think the things that came out in the report were your own experience, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I read through the report and it really resonates with me, and some of the experiences I also experienced, that level of interference and intimidation, and it was a very difficult period for people who worked in the SABC newsroom. Yeah.
Thandi, I guess it's what maybe some people might say is not in this report is the actual sort of, hard evidence that connects the dots. I think there's this sense that we know what happened, but save people testifying, there are no emails, there are no kind of pictures of people meeting in dark rooms and so on and so forth. Does that take away anything from its value?
Well, I think yes and no. I think that, we heard Tate Joe Thloloe talk about how they gathered the evidence, and it was over a very long period of time, the witnesses and the people who came forward to testify. But again, I think what I struggle to unpack in the report is, our research also shows, the favourable ANC coverage. You need to be able to connect the dots between that, and the fact that that's not reflected in the report is a concern. But I think that what is reflected in the report is the very sort of decisive abuse of authority. And I think we need to be focusing on those aspects and holding those responsible from that authoritative perspective accountable. I think that it's a difficult question around, well, what do we do now, and it's how do we hold those accountable who aren't at the SABC, and I think we need to be unpacking that.
The enforcers issue is a tricky one. Joe Thloloe tried to explain, at what point down the food chain do you say, anyone above this, you must fall on your sword, anyone below this, you were just following orders. What's your take on this? And, for staff walking around the building, they see some of these so-called enforcers, and it's difficult to think that we're safe now if these people are still around.
I think that, the enforcers were also victims of a system that was very repressive. And in my own experiences, none of my bosses, except one, came out and said, I'm going to be in trouble if you don't do this. In fact, they would really try and, get me to understand their position. But it came across from other bosses as intimidation and bullying. And therefore, and that is why people who still work here are very aggrieved about that, and they want something to do about it. And I think that that's something that the SABC will have to really sit down and think about it, because yes, to the ordinary workers, to the junior people, these people were enforcers, because often, you know, we were bullied into doing things that we knew went against the ethics of journalism. But, you know, like I say, they were also victims, because, I mean, and even as I read the report, some of them said, if I didn't do this, I was going to lose my job, you know, and nobody wants to lose their job. So, and it was a tough time, really. It was difficult for them. They were under pressure, and and I mean, at some point, yes, we can say we have to stand up to people who are bullying us. And you know, according to the report, some of these enforcers actually stood up and said, no, I will not do this. But at some point they thought, I am fighting a losing battle. And I often had felt like that, you know, there's no point in resisting. I'm just fighting a losing battle. And I'm going to be out in the cold, and I'm going to be alone.
And if we think about actually some of the people and how senior they were that managed to get fired, kicked out, paid out, it does show that if you did cross the line and you were put on a list, you could genuinely lose your job.
Exactly. Yeah.
So 58 interviews, one gets a sense that a lot of people were still scared actually to come before this commission. And in the report it does say that some people just weren't prepared. They would have loved to, but there still was this fear even then to come forward.
Well, you know, I think we also have to acknowledge the fact that the period saw not only, you know, from an editorial decision-making perspective, but that culture of fear and abusive intimidation. I mean, you have to accept that people are still, you know, it's still very raw. We haven't adequately acknowledged, I think, what happened with Sunafenta and with a range of other SABC employees with death threats and intimidation. And it's not, you know, I think the gravity of the issue is still very, very real. So you can understand that, you know, some people may not have been prepared to come forward during the inquiry.
Portia, one of the things that keeps coming through is this invisible hand. They couldn't connect it to Luthuli House. They keep on saying it was to the benefit of the ANC. In my experience, and I've seen it at several places over time, that there is a self-censorship that starts to creep in, so that you don't actually even need a phone call. You just know how to behave. Was there that kind of thing, do you think, during your time here?
Yeah, I mean, you know, a lot of people became aware of political interference at the SABC during the Hlaudi era, but it had started even before Hlaudi got to be in, you know, in the top position. So there was always that kind of, you know, fear or discomfort that, you know, I know if I go this route, I'm going to get a phone call. Sometimes the phone call came, sometimes it didn't come, sometimes it came after the fact. And then, you know, you'd be castigated for putting someone on air or for taking a certain angle of a story. So, and sometimes it was also about practicalities. I mean, we were often instructed to drop, you know, the show that we have prepared at last minute. So, you know, and it's in the nature of employees that they want to go home to their families. So sometimes they avoided going, you know, they self-censored because they also did not want for their lives to be interrupted. But also it was really just out of fear. And so, yeah, it was really, really, really hard.
And then sometimes guests would suddenly appear in shows and programs.
Yes. Yes, sometimes guests will just appear and you're like, oh, but I did not script for this. I did not do research. And which is another, you know, problem that was really, really major, which is why SABC News was dumbed down, because all of a sudden someone is thrust into your program and you have not prepared adequately for that guest, so you don't even know what to ask them.
So why was it difficult to connect the dots to the people that brought those guests?
I think that the reason why it is difficult to connect the dots is because these things were not communicated in writing. and they were also communicated in a very confusing and also sometimes a very demeaning manner.
Right.
So an employee would really feel like, you know what, if I said something about this, I'm going to be in trouble. Or sometimes even if you're not in trouble, but your life is going to be difficult at work. But I experienced that kind of communication where, you know, I would communicate something in writing to my boss to say, you know, I hear you want me to drop guest X, or you want me to drop this line of questioning. Can I get the reasons for that? And I will never get an email back because people did not want to put things in writing because they knew what it meant. So a lot of the time, the senior people knew the kind of environment that we operated under, but it was always downplayed because they also did not want to be seen as weak. So, and which is why they would bully and go around the corners to try and force whatever they've been told to
All
do.
right. So years and years of a certain type of culture, fear gets in and it becomes embedded. These recommendations, do you think they will help or will actually get to turn the ship around?
Well, I think we're already starting to see the ship being turned around. I think what we need to look at is that for the first time we've also got a very independent board. And that also came out of a court case and the powers of the minister around appointing and removing executive members. So we do have an independent board. And so I think that there are a few recommendations that are very good, including around the editorial policies and the editorial policy review. But it is really up to the board to look at the report and to take forward what they deem necessary. And we'll be keeping a close eye on what the next steps are.
What do you make of this advisory committee that needs to be set up?
I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea for independent people who are not within close proximity to the production of news to have a bird's eye view over those kind of issues and to be able to advise. Because one of the reasons why things went so horribly wrong is because all these lines were blurred, and especially where ethics was concerned. So if you get people who are respected as journalists, you know, as judges, as you know, people who might be lecturers in ethics, as the report suggests, then you have a group of people who are, who are learned and who understand what the SABC is all about, what the mandate of the SABC, and so it will help to ensure that the SABC deliver the way it should deliver.
All right, this is something we could talk about for quite a long time, but we're going to have to leave it there for the time being. But thanks so much indeed for your inputs there. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue with Media Monitor. Don't forget, hashtag SABC Media Monitor. What are your thoughts about what you've seen, what you've heard about the SABC and the changes that have taken place? Because certainly things have shifted significantly, particularly in the last year. So we want to hear your thoughts on that. Write to us.
The ANC-NEC revealed in a statement that they supported the user pay system.
So are you saying that motorists, Gauteng motorists, have to pay for e-tolls?
It is a principle that is raised. We are saying that we support the principle of user pay.
We imported a lot of technology as an example in order to invest here, and those people are not going to say, listen, you don't have to pay me back. They are demanding their money back.
SANRAL has another 19,000 kilometers of non-tolled roads which it finances the maintenance, the upgrading, the building of. Why they want to continuously force a square peg into a round hole on this issue just blows us away.
It makes no sense to pay a toll on a toll on a toll. The roads are still looking terrible. The whole thing is just ridiculous.
It needs to be scrapped.
We didn't ask for it. So why do we have to pay for it?
The people that are in the country and even those that are in
Mr.
outside the
Mendoza,
country.
and say those who are protesting were saying that they are engaging the government.
poverty. How do we resolve that?
Data is one of our major challenges, even with the implementation and measurement of the Sustainable Development Goals.
Is the Continental body fulfilling its mandate in terms of peace and security?
They have not been consistent. There has been no political will. A huge fault. A huge body with no teeth. No teeth to solve African problems.
During Women's Month, what I think we should remember as women, both in our personal and in our work lives, is that you never know what the future is going to bring, and always to keep a sense of optimism, because there really are endless possibilities for what you can achieve and the good things that are going to happen to you.
SABC News celebrates Women's Month.
Right, welcome back. And now for what's believed to be the continent's first in-house prison radio station. The Department of Correctional Services recently launched the digital station Basic Radio 98.7 at the Brandvlei Correctional Centre in the Western Cape. Now, it aims to give prisoners a voice whilst teaching them new skills and rehabilitating them.
Thank you and welcome to Basic Radio 98.7 FM. This is the morning show with Nicholas Fodero, myself, no Dorian Baron. Time now is 24 minutes.
Basic Radio 98.7 is fully digital and operated by inmates from the Brandvlei Correctional Centre. The program seeks to test the medium of radio as a mechanism for building life and technical skills of offenders to facilitate their reintegration back into society.
It creates a lot of hope. Apart from the kind of skills it gives those who participate, to those who are watching and who are listening to the radio, it gives them hope. It shows them that despite the fact that they are in a correctional facility, they are arrested, they can turn their lives around. It begins to say to them that for every offender who comes in thinking that life had become hopeless for him, there is a possibility of change. The intention is that we should have this kind of radio stations in almost all our facilities across the country.
Participants are chosen according to set criteria and go through an intensive 10-month broadcast development course.
There is a set criteria where the participants, they must already have passed grade 12. Over the years, we've only focused on the youth and some adult males, and from this year onward we started with females as well. We try as far as possible to cover all angles within the broadcasting spectrum. So we'll do voice training, we'll do some technical training, how to operate equipment, a bit of journalism, advertising and marketing as well.
Basic Radio 98.7 aims to provide a reliable and accessible voice to the audience, as well as allowing active participation by the audience, their fellow inmates.
Basic is very popular amongst all the inmates here. Everybody. There was a time when Basic went down, went off the air, and the people were coming to us like, when will Basic be on again? What time will Basic be on? And say, oh, it's Basic up and running. Say, no, because this way they are busy renovating here in the studios. And since Basic is on, we get a lot of positive feedback.
These newly acquired skills and practical on-air experience can one day secure an income upon their release.
So this, for me, it helps me to diversify my qualifications. At least when I get there, I don't have to follow one side of career. I can always go somewhere else in radio, TV, radio production. This will help me a lot when I go home.
Much more drawn into the marketing side of things, so I'd really love to do marketing, digital marketing when I go outside, but broadcasting, definitely I have to do it.
Basic Radio, that is our motto, right? Free your mind and soul. And for me to be here, it is kind of freeing my mind and myself, because it doesn't feel like I'm in a correctional facility, a prison per se, because of the opportunity we have and the things we get to do, the people we get to meet. So for me, it feels really that I'm still a free person. So I'm basically presenting the people, the other inmates as well. So also giving them the opportunity to also free their minds and their soul.
A close working relationship and agreements has been formed with various community radio broadcasters where ex-offenders can be placed upon release. Linky Bierman, SABC News, Brandvlei Prison, Worcester.
Okay, so that's it. Basic Radio 98.7, the voice of the people, they call it. Your quick thoughts on that? Tender?
Well, I think it's a really interesting development. It's great that it's a continent first, but it's also, when you talk about media and communications and information, it's a great skill to develop. So when we attribute that to the fact that it's a correctional services, correctional facility, it's an important life skill, and access to information and freedom of expression. It's also considered human rights, basic human rights enshrined in the Constitution. So when you consider all of those factors, it's a positive one, but also something very interesting that we'll keep an eye on. We'll keep watching.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think that if the radio station is dedicated to nation building, empowering inmates, rehabilitation, so that when they come out, they can be integrated into society with positive results.
And I suppose peer learning as well, isn't it? Would be good. Okay, all right. What are your thoughts at home? I'd love to hear what you think. Hashtag SABC Media Monitor. Share your thoughts with us. Okay, so here's another feature I'm really excited about every week now, and that's where we take you back in time. So land has been a burning issue in South Africa for centuries, and one the democratic South Africa has been grappling with since 1994. We take you back now to the early years of our democracy and some of the first land dealings in our Taking Your Back feature. Let's take you back now when the SABC covered the Brakpan land claim on this day in 1995.
Another community has decided to reclaim the land they were forced off in the late 70s. The old Brakpan location community was moved off their land and relocated in Tsakane Township, about 29 kilometers from the town centre. Now they've decided they want their land back.
Today is just ruins. Only a former resident can identify this as a swimming pool. There was visible nostalgia as they pointed at the destroyed church and other former community buildings. Malefani Malika is one of those who could spot his old home. He was 13 years old when his parents moved to Tsakane.
The place is too dry. It's not a place to live, actually. You can see, to plant a tree, you struggle to get the tree. So here we had trees, we had a lot of things. We had halls, we had, beautiful schools, we had tar roads and all those things.
One of the senior citizens, Mr. David Bupape, is now leading the Maruping Resettlement Committee. Former residents are saying that as there's been no sign of development, houses should be built.
I want to build a suburb, a modern suburb, built on modern lines, not old lines.
Some companies are already lending a helping hand.
We're doing these forms at the request of the Maruping Resettlement Committee, who needs to build a database of people that have been living before in the Maruping or the old Brakpan location.
Today, residents took a decision to reclaim their land through the court. Some of the information collected may also help in court. Sidi Tinani for TV News, East Rand.
All right, so that was our look back in time, 1995. If there's any particular year that you'd like us to relive for you, send us your thoughts and what year and what issue. We'll go dig up our tapes and bring that back to you. All right, we take a quick break, and when we come back, we go to Ghana for a start and a look in our newspapers.
One strong woman in my life has to be Sophia de Bruyn, who led a bunch of women to the union buildings. You strike a woman, you strike a rock. Need I say more? The opportunities that those women have given me to be part of this media industry has allowed me to walk into boardrooms and demand our space as women and the frontiers of journalism in what we do. A mentor once told me it's not good enough for women to go knocking on doors. It's time to beat them down. And there's no better way to do it than under the spotlight. This has given me the courage to be the journalist that I am today and to be a leader in the forefront of news.
SABC News celebrates Women's Month.
Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor. Now, for our first look at newspapers, we go to our Continental stories, and we cross now to Ghana and speak to Jacob Nyako, who works as a full-time lecturer at the Department of Communication Studies at the University of Cape Coast in Ghana. Thanks very much indeed for joining us on the program. Kwaba to you. Tell us, what is in the news in your country?
Well, there is issue of kidnapping in a section of Ghana. You know, Ghana and democracy, the country is constantly growing in these ideals. Now, what happened was that some 1 year ago, some 3 girls went missing in Takoradi. Takoradi is the regional capital of the Western region. And initially, it was headlined as missing girls. But as time goes on, when police investigation began, they realized that it was not a missing issue, but then they were kidnapped. Along the line, as investigations go on, as the family became agitated, and then the entire community also became worried about the whole issue, it also took an online dimension where they hashtagged it as Bring Back Our Girls, and it generated a lot of issues. Now, it appears to have some political undertones because people are on government to seize the girls. Okay. And especially when Canadian girls were kidnapped in Kumasi, and then in less than a week, they were found. So Ghanaians at this point do not understand why Canadian girls who went missing have been found, and then our own natives, so to say, it's been a year now, and then we can't trace them. So it's an issue that has generated a lot of concern.
All right.
Now, as investigations go on...
All right. We don't have a lot of time, unfortunately, so I'm just going to ask you to go to the next story.
Okay. Now, on the issue of NAM1 stands for Nana Apia Mensah. He is the CEO of Men's Gold. And as part of government efforts to sanitize the financial institutions in Ghana, what happened was that Men's Gold was one of the companies that was arrested. So the CEO was arrested, and then what happened was that among the charges that were raised were issues of operating without a license and also defrauding customers. Now he did not accept all those charges and now has been discharged. He's now to talk to management about that. Now, Men's Gold is an organization that deals in gold, that you can deposit your gold there, and then you get some interest on it, and then at the end of the day, you can also get your money back. But the issue is that there has been some political undertones also in relation to this, because at a point in time, NAM1, which is Nana Apia Mensah, traveled out of Ghana, and to the opposition, they thought the government in power allowed him the leeway to run away. That is what they determined. But now he was brought back by Interpol, and then the matter is still under investigation. And because people have deposited
unfortunately, we've run out of time. We're going to have to leave it there and say thank you very, very much indeed. Medasi, that was Jacob Nyako from Cape Coast University in Ghana, looking at the Ghanaian newspapers. All right, let's come back home to South Africa and CR17. it's everywhere. What do you make of this story?
Well, it is everywhere,
yeah.
And it's something we've been hearing for a couple of days or a couple of weeks now.
So you're looking at the Sunday Independent in particular.
Here's the Sunday Independent. I mean, what is interesting is that we actually have quite a diverse range of headlines and stories across our Sunday media today, which is quite nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Sunday Independent is leading with the CR17. And at MMA, what we usually do when we sort of analyze stories is a big thing for us is about the sources. The more sources that you hear, the more voices that you hear in stories, the better, the more credible. Yeah. And I'm struggling to find, a range of diverse sources in this particular story. And so I think for me that's a bit of a critique. And that's I'm not really sure how useful this is at this point. I'd like to.
Portia, why is this story important?
Well, look, I think that the story is important. Firstly, we have the political party funding bill that has been passed into law, but was not effective for these past elections. So it simply means that we cannot disclose. Political parties are not obliged to disclose where their funding comes from. So I find it very interesting that this is now out in the open, and we don't even know whether,
whether
this
is also complicated by the fact that this is actually, it's not even a national, it's a party election. It's an in-house election, as it were.
Yeah.
And yet it's being treated almost like this is the actual national elections. And I wonder if there is a difference. I don't know. Tandy?
Well, I think that there is a difference. I think that at this point it's still all a little bit murky. Yeah. I'm not really sure what to make of all the details and the stories. But I think we'll be going to wait and see. I'm not really... Yeah, it's a little bit confusing about the attention that this is all getting as well. But again, if it is something, I'd like to see a lot more voice. I'd like to see a lot more engagement, a lot more sources being used in this to sort of give those different perspectives.
Okay.
We didn't see anything from Women's Day.
30 seconds each. Women's Month. How is the story being reported?
Well, I'm very disappointed. Women's Day was on Thursday, and all the papers, are really not zooming in on women's issues on their front pages, or even, there's mention of women's issues here and there in the newspapers. But it's not enough. It really is telling of the fact that the news is still lagging very behind in covering women's issues.
Absolutely agree. I think that we do critique it, that we shouldn't only have one day where we focus on everything, but the fact that we still do, and the fact that we still try and create awareness, you would think that we would get more coverage. But I'd like to see a lot more women's stories across our media constantly.
Ladies, you guys were amazing. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for inviting us.
It was greatly appreciated.
Thanks very much.
You at home, thank you so much indeed. Siyabonga kakhulu. Tenda Zguru, thank you for joining us. Join us again next week at the same time for Media Monitor, where we'll have more of the same. And don't forget, we can have conversations throughout the week at #SABC Media Monitor. From me and the team, bye everyone.